I used to think a marriage ends loudly. Doors slamming, voices sharpened into knives, the kind of arguments that make neighbors turn down their TVs. Ours didn't. If it ended at all, it did it like a battery dying. One dimming light at a time until the room looked normal, and then, somehow, dark. I knew Nora's habits the way a mechanic knows engine noise. Towels folded in thirds, not halves. Her shoes lined like punctuation under the bench. Her tea bags left on saucers like tiny paper boats waiting for one more wave. 10 years builds a private language. I thought I was fluent. The photograph changed the grammar. It found me by accident on a Sunday night that smelled like laundry and tomato sauce. Lily, our 8-year-old, was drawing constellations on the living room window with a dry erase marker, turning Orion into a stick figure with ridiculous biceps. Nora was at a client mixer, the kind that produces filtered photos and headaches. I was clearing space on an old hard drive when a ghost of a shared album pinged my screen, one we'd linked years ago and then forgotten. I clicked out of habit, expecting beach shots and birthdays. There she was, Nora, in a bar I didn't recognize, under a neon sign that read Lucy's with a little crown perched on the Y. Her hair was pinned back the way she never wears it for me. Her posture had that extra inch you get when you're seen. Her hand rested on a man's chest like it had always belonged there. On her other hip, a boy, 5 maybe, wore a paper crown and looked at her like small planets look at their sun. If the image had a sound, it was the soft click of something important breaking. My brain did what brains do when the floor drops. It offered me gentler floors. Industry event. Flattering angle. Maybe she was steadying the kid while a stranger said, "Smile." Then a detail betrayed me. In the mirror behind them, the neon crown reflected twice. Coincidence doesn't line up that cleanly on its own. I saved the photo and pulled the metadata. Timestamp, 8:57 p.m. Location, 3 towns south, near the river. 2 hours after Nora had kissed Lily goodnight, borrowed my umbrella, and told me not to wait up. I didn't. The umbrella leaned by the back door like a closed question. I wanted to call, to demand a context big enough to hold the picture without shattering it, or us. But I do network security for a living. The fastest way to turn a small breach into a catastrophe is to panic. So I breathed. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. The way I teach junior analysts when a console lights up red. Then I opened a blank note and wrote 3 rules. A scaffold over a sinkhole. Rule 1, identify the place. Rule 2, confirm the timeline. Rule 3, do not confront. I added a 4th line I didn't want to need. Lily. Whatever truth this carried, affair, coincidence, some brittle mix, we were not turning our daughter into shrapnel. I zoomed in on the man. Stainless steel watch, black face, engraved bezel, the kind of timeless a salesman rehearses. The boy's crown had a chocolate smear at the edge. Nora's thumb hovered near it, mid-wipe, the same motion she used to make over Lily's cheekbones when cake beat caution. I wasn't jealous of him yet. I was jealous of the ease in her expression, the unarmored laugh that had moved out of our house months ago without leaving a forwarding address. "Dad," Lily said from the window, "do stars get tired of being stared at?" I told her I didn't think so. I didn't tell her some of the light we see is old news from dead things. At 11, Nora slipped in, smelling like citrus and smoke. "Loud," she said of the mixer, rolling her shoulders, setting her phone face down. She kissed my cheek, soft and familiar, and it felt like a souvenir from a trip I hadn't taken. We went to bed. She fell asleep fast, a hand flung over the pillow like a flag of occupation. I stared at the ceiling and let questions parade by. Who is he? Why that bar? Why the crown? Why lie when you've always been good at the truth? At 2 a.m., I moved to my office. The internet is a patient accomplice. It took 10 minutes to find Lucy's. The neon crown was their logo. An inside joke from a long-dead owner who collected novelty headwear. Their Instagram advertised Tuesday trivia with a pun so bad it made my teeth hurt. I mapped the route from our house. 2 quick turns to the highway, 1 gray ribbon south, a left at a pawn shop that never sleeps. I didn't sleep either. I wrote the rules again on a sticky note and pressed it to my monitor the way people press prayers into old walls. Dawn rinsed the kitchen in a thin gold. I made Lily heart-shaped pancakes because it felt good to make something that looked exactly like what it claimed to be. Nora padded in wearing my college sweatshirt, kissed the top of my head and said, "Late client tonight, don't wait up." She said it like weather. I nodded like a forecast. On my phone, I labeled the photo folder with a single word, because. Not because I needed to torture myself, because I needed a reason bigger than anger to keep going. Anger is a match. Reasons are a lantern. I decided to be a lantern. At 9:12 a.m., and as if on cue, a text came from an unknown number. "Ask her about Tuesdays before you burn the house down." I typed, "Who are you?" No reply. Just my reflection in the dark screen, eyes I barely recognized. Second lives don't introduce themselves. They wait to see what kind of person you'll be when you finally notice them. I put the sticky note in my wallet, kissed Lily's paint-smeared forehead, and left for work with the calm of a man who has decided not to panic until the system tells him exactly where it's bleeding. By Thursday, I'd learned 2 things about Lucy's. First, Tuesday nights were family trivia nights. Kids ate free, adults paid in laughs and bar tabs. Second, the place didn't advertise much beyond its loyal crowd. The photo hadn't come from their social media. Whoever sent it had been in the room, close enough to see Nora's hand on that man's chest. At work, I couldn't focus on the quarterly penetration test. Every string of code felt like a puzzle missing half its pieces. My mind kept replacing variables with that neon crown, her tilted smile, the boy with the paper crown. I toggled between firewall logs and a map of the bar's neighborhood until my eyes blurred. I thought about confronting her. But Rule 3, do not confront, glowed like a red warning light in my head. Direct confrontation without proof turns into your word against theirs. And in the court of marriage, that trial leaves bruises no judge can see. Instead, I ran a trace on the number that sent the message. Burner phone. Registered in the next county over, bought with cash at a corner store. That told me one thing. Whoever this was didn't want to be known, but they wanted me to know enough to keep looking. They'd given me a breadcrumb. I wasn't going to drop it. That night, Nora claimed she had a late project meeting. She dressed casual, but not the kind of casual you wear to sit in a conference room with stale coffee and buzzing fluorescents. Dark jeans, ankle boots, a sweater that fit her like it had memorized her shape. She left before dinner was fully plated. Lily and I ate in silence, her fork scraping against her plate like a clock ticking too loudly. When Lily went to bed, I made my move. I drove south, the hum of the highway a metronome for my pulse. Lucy's was smaller than I expected, a squat brick building with fogged-up windows and the smell of fried food leaking into the parking lot. I parked across the street under a busted streetlight, the kind that flickers like it's remembering something. Inside, through the glass, I spotted her immediately. Nora sat in a booth near the back, her hair down this time, the glow from the neon crown painting her face in soft gold. Across from her, the man from the photo. late 30s, tall, shoulders like someone who still played sports on weekends, leaned in close, laughing at something she'd said. The boy was there too, in the same paper crown, now bent at the edge like he'd been chewing on it. They didn't look like a fling. They looked like a unit. I watched for 10 minutes, taking in every detail. Nora reached over to cut the boy's burger in half. The man brushed a crumb from her lip with his thumb. Casual, like they'd been here before. No hesitation, no awkwardness, just the ease of routine. My chest tightened, not with rage, but with a kind of grief I didn't know how to shape. This wasn't an affair built on adrenaline and secrecy. This was something older, steadier, a life I didn't know she'd been building parallel to mine. I pulled out my phone and took 3 photos through the glass. Proof. Not the kind that wins arguments, but the kind that anchors you when you're drowning in self-doubt. When they left, the boy hugged Nora and shouted, "Miss Nora!" with the fearless joy only 5-year-olds have. Not Mom. Miss Nora. The distinction landed like a small, sharp stone in my shoe. Easy to ignore for a minute, impossible after an hour. She kissed the boy's hair, then Marcus on the mouth, quick and unhurried, before heading to her car. Routine, not panic. Habit, not accident. When I got home, the house felt too big. I poured a whiskey I didn't want and stared at the photos. The burner phone number still sat in my messages like a coiled snake. I texted again. Why me? Still no answer. At midnight, I heard her come in. She didn't smell like citrus and smoke this time. She smelled like warmth, like wood polish and someone else's laughter. She kissed my cheek, thanked me for letting her work late. I said, any time, and it tasted like metal in my mouth. Rule 4, Lily, was the only reason I didn't say more. But rules bend, and sometimes they break. Friday morning, the rules I'd written for myself felt like paper shields. I moved through breakfast with Lily as if nothing had shifted, but the photographs in my phone burned like hot coal in my pocket. Nora was cheerful, humming as she poured coffee, asking Lily about her spelling test. She didn't look like a woman balancing 2 lives. She looked like the woman I married. But once she left for work, the house exhaled differently. The silence pressed in, asking questions I didn't want to answer. I pulled up Lucy's on a local events page and found a grainy calendar of their weekly specials. Tonight, live music. I could imagine her there again, head tilted in that familiar way when she laughed. I hadn't seen her laugh like that at home lately. Work was a blur. I kept checking the clock, mapping out when I'd leave. By the time the sun set, I was parked in the same spot across from Lucy's. My seat reclined enough to hide my face if she glanced toward the window. The bar's lights flickered on, neon humming, people drifting in and out. At 8, my pulse kicked when I saw her. Same sweater as last night, same boots. She slipped inside, and 10 minutes later, he arrived, this time without the boy. They sat at the same booth, ordered drinks, and leaned in like conspirators. This time, I didn't just watch. I went in. The air smelled like beer and fried onions, the floor sticky under my shoes. A guitarist was tuning in the corner. I took a seat at the far end of the bar, angled so I could see them in the reflection of the mirror behind the liquor bottles. They weren't flirting in the frantic way of new lovers. They were steady, comfortable, exchanging glances that carried history. At one point, her hand rested on his arm. Not possessive, just claiming. When the music started, he reached for her hand under the table. She didn't pull away. I ordered a drink I didn't touch. Every nerve felt sharpened, every sound amplified. The clink of glasses, the muted laughter, the low strum of guitar strings. I wanted to walk over, drop the photos on the table, and watch her face shift. But Rule 3 still whispered in my head. Don't confront without knowing the full shape of the truth. At 9, she went to the bathroom. He pulled out his phone, typed something, and smiled. My phone buzzed at the same time. A text from the burner number, just 3 words. You see now, I looked up. He was staring into his glass like nothing had happened. By the time Nora returned, I'd left cash on the bar and slipped out. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly as I drove home. The text echoed in my head. This wasn't random. Whoever sent that message knew exactly where I was and what I'd seen. At home, I backed up the photos to an encrypted drive. I added the text to a growing folder labeled simply, because evidence wasn't about rage anymore. It was about building something solid, undeniable. When Nora came in just after 11, she kissed the top of my head and said she was tired. I nodded, closing my laptop before she could see the open files. In bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the refrigerator downstairs syncing with my heartbeat. I thought about the boy in the paper crown, about the way Nora had touched the man's hand without thinking. And I thought about the rules. Maybe it was time to start writing new ones. Saturday began with the smell of pancakes. Nora was at the stove, flipping them like nothing in the world was out of place. Lily sat at the counter, swinging her legs, already chattering about a field trip to the zoo next week. I forced a smile, sat down, and let the warmth of the pancakes hide the cold in my chest. Every move felt scripted. Nora laughed at something Lily said, and for a moment, I caught the version of her I used to know. That was the problem. She could still play the role so perfectly. After breakfast, she suggested taking Lily to the park. I offered to join, but she shook her head. We'll have some girls' time, she said, kissing my cheek in passing. The door closed behind them, and the house felt too quiet again. I used that silence. I went into Nora's office, a small room she'd claimed for freelance work years ago. Normally, I respected her space. Not today. The desk drawers were a mix of chaos and order. Bills neatly stacked, sticky notes with half-finished thoughts, receipts for groceries. But in the bottom drawer, under a pile of old notebooks, I found an envelope. Inside were printed photographs, the kind you'd get from a cheap one-hour service. They were of Lily, but not taken by me. Some were at school, some at the park, and in several, that same man from Lucy's was nearby. Sometimes with the boy, sometimes without. He wasn't just a stranger. He'd been around our daughter. I slipped the photos back exactly as I found them, my stomach knotting tighter. The rest of the day, I kept busy. Laundry, dishes, small repairs around the house. Every now and then, I'd check my phone, half expecting another burner message. Nothing came. That night, I lay awake listening to Nora's breathing. It was even calm, like she was dreaming of something far from here. My own thoughts were jagged. Sunday, I made a decision. After church, I dropped Nora and Lily off at home, telling them I needed to run an errand. Instead, I drove to an address I'd found through a quick property search on the man's name, an address I'd gotten by digging into the metadata of one of the photos. It was a small house on a quiet street. No car in the driveway, but a tricycle leaned against the porch. I sat there, watching the curtains for movement, wondering if he'd recognize me from the bar. At 3:17, a car pulled up. He got out first, then the boy, wearing the same paper crown from that night. Nora stepped out of the passenger side. She didn't even glance around, just followed them inside like she'd done it 100 times. The rules? They were burning now. I drove away, but not far. Parked 2 streets over, I watched until she left alone at 5:42. By the time I got home, she was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, talking about making soup. I played along, nodding, smiling at the right moments. But in my mind, I was building something different, a timeline. Monday morning, I reached out to Rourke, a private investigator I knew from college. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. Gave him the man's name, the bar, the house, told him to dig quietly. "Whatever you find," I said, "I want it clean. Dates, times, names." He didn't ask why. That night, as Nora curled up beside me on the couch to watch a movie, I felt the distance between us like a wall we'd both built. Hers out of secrets, mine out of silence. I didn't know yet what the endgame would look like. Divorce, custody, something else entirely. But I knew this. The more she smiled at me, the more dangerous I felt becoming. By Wednesday, Rourke called. His tone told me enough before he spoke. "You were right," he said. "And it's worse than you think." He sent over a file. In it were photos, time-stamped, of Nora meeting the man at various places, restaurants, parks, even a hotel on the outskirts of town. There were phone logs, too, showing dozens of calls and texts from a number she had saved under Claire, PTA. One photo froze me. Lily, holding the man's hand outside an ice cream shop. Nora was beside them, laughing. "They're not careful," Rourke said. "If you're thinking about legal action, you'll have plenty to work with. Legal action." The phrase felt like a loaded gun sitting on the table between us. That night, over dinner, Nora told me she might be going out of town for a workshop next month. She slid the lie across the table like it was nothing. I played my role, asking a few polite questions, pretending to be interested. Inside, I was planning. Thursday, I took a day off work and drove to the courthouse. I asked about custody proceedings, what proof was needed, what counted as endangerment. The clerk gave me a packet thick with forms and legal jargon. I took it home, highlighted sections until the pages looked like a crime scene. By Friday, I had a system. I tracked her movements through a shared calendar app she'd forgotten we still had linked. I saved every receipt, every incidental proof of her absences. I kept a separate file on a USB drive hidden in my toolbox. And then, something I didn't expect happened. Saturday morning, I got another anonymous message. "You don't know the whole story. Stop digging, no number, no name. Just those words." When I showed it to Rourke, he whistled. "Means you're close to something." That afternoon, I decided to push. I drove back to the man's house, this time parking directly across the street. I waited until he came out to mow the lawn. When our eyes met, I didn't look away. He hesitated, then went back to mowing. 10 minutes later, Nora called me. "Hey, where are you? You sound far away." "I'm just getting some air," I said. "Don't do anything stupid," she replied, and hung up before I could answer. She knew, or at least she suspected. That night, I moved the USB drive to a safer place, the attic. And I started thinking less about what she'd done, and more about why someone wanted me to stop. The next move wouldn't just be about catching her. It would be about cornering whoever thought they could send me warnings like that. Sunday came with a false calm. The sky was overcast, the kind of weather that makes the world feel muted, like everything's waiting for a storm. I spent the morning with Lily, taking her to the park. She laughed on the swings, her hair flying, her cheeks pink from the cold breeze. Watching her, I made myself a silent promise. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't be caught in the crossfire. When we got home, there was a car parked 2 houses down. Black sedan, tinted windows. I'd never seen it before. An hour later, when I stepped outside to take the trash, it was still there. No one got out. No one rolled the windows down. By evening, my phone buzzed again. Another anonymous text. Think about your daughter before you ruin lives. That one hit harder. It wasn't just about me anymore. They were dragging Lily into this. I showed the message to Rourke. His jaw tightened. This isn't just about an affair. You're dealing with someone who doesn't want certain truths out. Could be money. Could be influence. Influence? I asked. He nodded. Your wife's new man. He's not just some guy. He's connected. Think political circles, business deals. If he goes down, a lot of people get nervous. That explained the surveillance, the warnings, the sudden urgency. But it didn't change my course. Monday morning, I left for work early. But I didn't go to the office. I followed the black sedan when it rolled out of the neighborhood. It drove across town, eventually stopping in front of a law firm I recognized from a few high-profile news cases. One of the partners stepped out, a man whose face had been on TV defending CEOs accused of fraud. He glanced around before getting into the sedan. I snapped photos from my car, my hands steady despite the adrenaline. That night, Nora came home later than usual. She smelled faintly of whiskey and expensive cologne that wasn't mine. She went straight to the shower without saying much. While she was in there, I checked her purse. There was a receipt from a hotel bar, dated that afternoon. 2 drinks, both expensive. She was slipping. By midnight, I'd made my decision. This wouldn't just be a divorce. This would be a surgical strike. Take out the affair, the cover-up, and whoever thought they could scare me into silence. And the first step would be finding out exactly how high this connection went. The next day, I arranged to meet Rourke in a diner far from downtown. The kind of place where the coffee is terrible, but no one asks questions. He slid a manila folder across the table. I pulled his name, he said. Marcus Cross, real estate developer. But here's the kicker. He's been under quiet federal scrutiny for 2 years. Money laundering, offshore accounts, bribery. Nothing has stuck, yet. I flipped through the photos inside. Marcus at charity galas, shaking hands with politicians, posing next to luxury developments. And there, in 2 different shots, was Nora, her hand on his arm, her smile calculated. My stomach churned, not from jealousy, but from the realization that she wasn't just in it for the thrill. She was aligning herself with power. Rourke leaned in. If you can get something solid, the feds might fast-track their case. But once you move, there's no going back. These people will bury you if they can. I thought about Lily, about the threats, about the fact that if Marcus went down, Nora's perfect little safety net would vanish overnight. That night, when Nora left for a networking event, I tailed her, kept 2 cars back. She drove to the Grand Meridian Hotel. 5 stars, rooftop bar, private suites. I watched from across the street as she met Marcus in the lobby. They headed to the elevators. I snapped photos of them holding hands, laughing, Marcus whispering something in her ear. Then I noticed a man in a gray suit watching me from the corner. He wasn't taking photos, he was memorizing my face. I left before he could approach, but my gut told me it was already too late. Back home, I locked every door, checked every window. I knew the game had shifted. I wasn't just a husband digging into an affair anymore. I was stepping into a war between people who thought they were untouchable, and I had just made myself a target. The first threat came the next morning. A plain white envelope slid under my front door. No name, no return address. Inside was a single photo. Me outside the Grand Meridian the night before. My face clear. My license plate visible. On the back, in neat block letters, "Stop, or your daughter learns what fear really is." I gripped the photo so hard it crumpled in my hand. My first instinct was rage. My second was fear, because this wasn't just about me anymore. I drove Lily to school myself, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. A black SUV followed for 2 blocks before peeling away. Could have been nothing. Could have been everything. That evening, I met Rourke again. This time in the crowded food court of a mall. Public, noisy, harder to eavesdrop. I slid the photo across the table. He frowned. "They're letting you know they see you. They're testing if you'll fold." "I won't," I said, my voice low but steady. "Then you need to hit them before they hit you. Marcus is careful. He doesn't text anything incriminating, doesn't use his own accounts. But people like him always make one mistake. Find it, and you end this." That night, I stayed up combing through Nora's old emails, her cloud backups, even the metadata on photos she'd posted years ago. And that's when I found it. A photo from a charity event, taken 3 months before she left me. Behind her, blurred but still visible, was a laptop screen open to an email. I zoomed in until the pixels bled, and there it was. A bank transfer confirmation to an offshore account. From Cross Holdings. If I could get the full paper trail, it wouldn't just ruin Marcus. It would tie Nora to his crimes too. But to get it, I'd have to step right into his world. And this time, there would be no slipping out unnoticed. The plan shifted from clever to clean. I wasn't going to cross a line that would haunt me later. Claire called at dusk. "Your ghost is ready to talk." The ghost had a name. Jenna Park, accounts payable at Cross Holdings. The burner messages were hers. She'd watched Marcus reroute funds through shells with names that sounded like forgotten hotels, and she wanted out before the floor collapsed. We met in the back of a library where security cameras only cared about books. Jenna slid a thumb drive across the table like it was radioactive. "I can't leak this," she said, voice low. "But I can tell you exactly what to subpoena and where the bodies are buried in the ledger." She mapped it out on a legal pad. Dates, vendors that didn't exist, a consulting line item that spelled Nora's initials backward. Rourke took it from there. Within 48 hours, my attorney filed targeted subpoenas. Vendor invoices, bank ledgers, internal emails tied to Jenna's roadmap. No fishing expedition, surgical cuts. The judge signed off. Paper started moving. A week later, boxes arrived at my lawyer's office. Chain of custody tags bright as warning flares. We opened them with gloved patience. The story told itself. Transfers out of Cross Holdings into Red Crown Partners, then into an LLC. Nora had set up months before she ever said the word workshop to me. Not rumor, not screenshots, originals. Jenna sent one last burner text I didn't answer. "You're not crazy. Be careful." Then the number died. I didn't need more. I had the path, and now I had the road signs with government stamps on them. The subpoenaed emails were worst in their casual tone. Marcus to Nora. "Move the lake asset first. Sentiment clouds judges." Nora back. "Adam won't see it. I'll keep him busy with custody noise." Not metaphors, instructions. In a folder marked Contingency sat a memo drafted by Marcus's fixer, laying out how to paint me volatile if I pushed. 2 staged incidents. Character affidavits from people I'd never met. A PR plan with headlines already written. They hadn't just built a second life. They'd architected my erasure. I didn't rage. I organized. Every document went 2 places. An encrypted drive in my safe and a mirrored archive in Claire's hands. Rourke prepared affidavits. My lawyer prepped the motion for a preliminary asset freeze and an emergency custody hearing, arguing risk of dissipation and bad faith litigation tactics. That night, I sat on the floor of Lily's room while she fell asleep mid-story, one hand still on the book's corner. I promised out loud, to the dark, to myself, that whatever happened next would be by the book. No shortcuts, no stains. When I stepped back into the hallway, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. I was on the right side of the line, and the line would hold. I started small. The first move was a quiet meeting with my lawyer, one of the sharpest family and corporate attorneys in the city. I didn't walk in with suspicions. I walked in with proof. He skimmed through the files, his eyebrows arching higher with every page. "You're holding a loaded cannon," he said finally. "But if you fire it all at once, they'll see it coming. We bleed them slowly." That was exactly what I wanted. The next step was a tip-off, anonymous, of course, to the internal audit team at Cross Holdings. Just a few discrepancies in the accounts. Nothing pointing to me. A week later, I casually mentioned to a mutual friend, someone I knew couldn't keep a secret, that I'd been consulting with a private investigator about Nora's recent spending habits. That rumor spread like wildfire. By the time Nora tried to reach out, her voice was no longer confident. It was clipped, rushed. She left a voicemail saying she just wanted to clear the air, and things might have gotten out of hand. I didn't answer. Instead, I sent an anonymous envelope to Marcus's estranged business partner. Inside, a single document from the subpoena hall that proved Marcus had cut him out of a lucrative deal. I hadn't forged it. I'd simply rerouted it. The city was small enough and the stakes high enough that whispers began to circle back to them. They couldn't know how much I really had. And that was the point. I wanted them waking up at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if tomorrow was the day everything fell apart. Because tomorrow was coming, and it was bringing me with it. The night before court, Lily asked if I'd come to her class reading the next day. I started to say I couldn't, then stopped. "I'll be there," I said, because some promises are better shields than any lawyer. We practiced her lines on the couch. She stumbled on "neighborly," then nailed it and giggled into my shoulder. When she slept, I drafted my own script. Say little, show much, keep the temperature low. Morning brought rain and headlines. An industry blog hinted at an internal audit at Cross Holdings. I hadn't leaked it, but rumors travel faster than filings. Outside the courthouse, umbrellas bloomed. Inside, Nora's heels clicked a tempo I used to know. Marcus didn't meet my eyes. We opened with the paper, a clean chain from ledger to shell to Nora's LLC, lifted straight from the subpoenas. Opposing counsel tried to swat at process. My lawyer answered with receipts and timestamps. The judge stopped looking at us and started looking through us. That's when Rourke texted a single line from the hallway. "Jenna's here." We called Jenna as a witness. She walked in like a person who decided which life she wanted to live. Under oath, she didn't flinch. She explained the vendor codes, the Tuesday transfers timed to slip past controls, the memo Marcus called weatherproof. When opposing counsel tried to turn her into a grudge, She produced her resignation letter dated last week and the email to HR flagging anomalies months ago. She wasn't a traitor. She was a professional who'd had enough. Nora watched Jenna the way one cliff watches another crumble. Marcus wrote notes he didn't use. When Jenna stepped down, the room felt different. Less like a marriage case, more like a map of a quiet crime finally shown in daylight. My lawyer slid the internal email across to opposing counsel, the one where Marcus suggested, "Hollow out Adam's base while we bury him in motions." The judge read it twice, then looked at Nora. "Ms. Whitfield, did you understand the purpose of these transfers?" Nora's voice was small. I thought it was asset protection." "For whom?" my lawyer asked. She glanced at Marcus. He didn't look back. "For us," she whispered. "Us meaning you and Mr. Cross?" the judge said. "Yes." Silence took the room like weather. Somewhere behind me a pen clicked, then stopped. The judge turned to Marcus. "And you authorized these structures?" "Yes," Marcus said, jaw tight. "On advice." "Advice," the judge repeated, "rarely writes its own memos." Opposing counsel tried to pivot, paint me controlling, suggest my evidence was obsessive. My lawyer didn't argue character. He asked one question. "Mr. Cross, who drafted the contingency strategy to portray Mr. Carter as unstable?" Marcus hesitated for the first time. "Our communications team." "And did Ms. Whitfield approve it?" Marcus didn't answer. Nora did. "Yes." It came out cracked and human, not polished. She stared at the table. "I thought it would keep me safe." "From what?" my lawyer asked. "From being small again," she said, barely audible. There it was. The motive no memo can sanitize. The room didn't forgive her, but it finally understood the shape of her fear. The judge called a recess. No one moved like a victor. During recess, I slipped out, not to talk strategy, but to keep a promise. Lily's class ringed a carpet and read about a bear learning the way home by smell. She waved when she saw me, surprised and proud. 10 minutes later, I was back under the courthouse lights, the smell of rain still on my jacket. We introduced the recording. Jenna had preserved it through legal channels when Marcus's fixer rehearsed timelines for moving funds before filings. The judge listened without blinking. When the audio clicked off, my lawyer didn't thump the table. He just said, "Your Honor, our requests are narrow. Custody to Mr. Carter, temporary asset freeze, and an order precluding further dissipation." Opposing counsel looked tired. Marcus looked smaller. Nora looked like a person who'd finally seen the whole of her reflection. The judge adjusted his glasses as the clerk set the recording device aside. The room held its breath. "Ms. Whitfield, Mr. Cross," he said, voice low but firm. "Do either of you deny that the voices on this recording are yours?" Neither spoke. Nora's lips trembled. Marcus stared at the floor. The judge sighed, the sound heavy with finality. "Very well. Given the evidence presented, the court rules in favor of Mr. Carter. Full custody of the child is granted to him. All marital assets will remain under his control, and the prenuptial agreement stands as written. A temporary freeze is ordered on any accounts connected to the entities identified today." The gavel struck once. It was over. Nora collapsed into her chair, one hand over her face. Marcus edged away from her like she was radioactive. I felt no triumph, just an unshackling. Years of doubt, betrayal, and silence washed off me like rain sliding from a windshield. I rose, buttoned my jacket, and walked toward the doors. Outside, the day was bright and crisp. My sister fell into step beside me, slipping her arm through mine. "You okay?" she asked. I exhaled slowly. Better than okay, I said. I'm free. Weeks later, at the lake she once called useless, the water held the sky without effort. Lily ran the length of the dock and back, hair bright in cold sun, laughter clean of secrets. I thought about everything I'd brought to court: ledgers, emails, a recording, and the one thing I hadn't needed to prove: that peace is expensive and worth the price. People trade gold for glitter when they can't tell the difference. Nora wanted safety and picked a lock that closed behind her. I wanted the truth and found a door that opened. You don't need to burn someone's world to win. You just have to stop letting them live in yours. If it were you, would you keep the peace and stay quiet? Or carry the truth into daylight and pay what it costs?